I told my father I wished he'd never existed. 3 hours later, I was holding his hand as he died, and he used his last breath to forgive me. You don't know how much someone has bled for you until a stranger with red eyes forces you to watch. And by then, you're standing in a hospital hallway with blood on your knees, trying to remember how to breathe. Some of you already know what this feels like. The weight of words you can't take back. The suffocating silence where an apology should have been. If you've ever looked at someone who loved you and saw only what they couldn't give you, if you've ever mistaken sacrifice for failure, this story might break something open in you. And maybe you need to stay for stories like this. The ones that don't let you look away from what love actually costs. The jacket was older than most of my memories. I stood in the doorway of our farmhouse kitchen watching my father, Lionel Reeve, 63 years old, hands like leather, eyes permanently tired, mending the same faded denim jacket he'd worn since before I was born. The same one he wore to town every Thursday. The same one people probably pitted him for. I'd just come back from another failed job interview in Wichita. Another polished office where they smiled too kindly and asked about my unconventional background. Another drive home on dusty Kansas roads where I had 2 hours to watch my life shrink in the rearview mirror. "How'd it go?" he asked without looking up. His needle moved slow and careful through the torn sleeve. I didn't answer. I couldn't, because the sight of him sitting there, mending instead of replacing, surviving instead of living, made something hot and vicious rise in my throat. "Lana, why don't you just buy a new jacket?" The words came out sharper than I meant. "That thing is falling apart." He glanced up, confused. "It's got plenty of life left." "No, it doesn't." I stepped into the kitchen, and I could feel it building. Years of watching him accept less, years of defending our life to people who looked at us like we were broken. Nothing here does. This house doesn't. That truck doesn't. We don't. His hands stilled. What happened today? What always happens? My voice was shaking now. They looked at my address and saw someone who doesn't belong. Someone who comes from nothing. Someone whose father is a... I stopped myself, but barely. "A what?" His voice was so quiet it hurt. "A farmer who never wanted more. Who's content to watch his daughter drown in the same poverty he chose." He stood slowly, setting the jacket down like it was made of glass. "I chose you, Lana. I chose." "Don't." I backed toward the door, and something in me was fracturing. "Don't tell me you did your best. Don't tell me you sacrificed. Because if you did, it wasn't enough. It was never enough. Please." He reached for my hand, that worn, calloused hand that had held me through every fever, every nightmare, every time the world felt too big. "Let me explain." I ripped my hand away, like his touch burned. "I wish I was alone, and you were never in my life." The words came out cold and clear, and I watched them land like stones in water. "I hate you so much." His face went pale. Not hurt, worse than hurt. Broken. I didn't stay to watch him crumble. I grabbed my keys and ran, and the screen door slammed behind me with a sound like a gunshot. The last thing I heard was the chair scraping across the kitchen floor, the sound of him sitting back down alone, with that goddamn jacket in his lap. I drove until the farmhouse disappeared behind the wheat fields, until the sky turned the color of old bruises, until I couldn't remember why I was shaking. I ended up in the parking lot of Rosie's Diner on Route 4, a place where the coffee tastes like regret and the lights flicker like dying stars. I sat in my car with the engine off, watching moths circle the neon sign, and tried to convince myself I meant what I said. But the truth, the terrible, suffocating truth, was that I didn't know if I meant it or not. And that's when I saw him. A man standing at the edge of the parking lot where the asphalt meets the dark. He wasn't moving, wasn't looking away, just watching me with eyes that caught the light wrong. Too bright, too red, like brake lights reflected in rain. I should have locked the doors. Should have driven away. Instead, I rolled down my window. "Bad night." His voice was low and smooth, but there was something ancient underneath it. Something that had seen too much and stopped caring. "The worst," I whispered. He stepped closer, and I could see him now, dressed too well for this part of Kansas, pale skin that didn't belong to anyone who worked under the sun. And those eyes. God, those eyes.
"Tell me," he said.
Not a question. A command. And I did. I told him everything. The interview. The jacket. The words I'd screamed at my father. The shame that had been rotting inside me since I was old enough to understand what poor meant. He listened without judgment, without sympathy, without any of the empty comfort people usually offer. When I finished, he was silent for a long time. Then he said, "You think you know what your father took from you?" "I know what he took."
"No."
He leaned down so we were eye level, and his gaze pinned me in place. "You know what he couldn't give. That's different. And if you want the truth, if you're brave enough, I can show you." "Show me what?" "What love actually costs." My heart was pounding, but I didn't move, didn't look away, because some broken part of me needed to know, needed proof that I was right to be angry, right to feel cheated. He extended his hand through the window, long fingers, impossibly cold.
"Take it," he said.
"Or don't. But you only get one chance to see what you destroyed." I should have driven away, should have recognized the warning in his words. Instead, I took his hand, and the world shattered like glass. The cold hit me first, not the cold of winter, but something deeper, the kind that lives in places where light has given up. His hand tightened around mine, and the parking lot dissolved like watercolor in rain. I tried to scream, but my voice was gone. Tried to pull away, but my body wasn't my own anymore. The world became a blur of colors and sounds that shouldn't exist, the howl of time bending, the whisper of moments that had already died. When everything stopped spinning, we were standing in nothing. A void. Just him and me, and the terrible weight of silence. "What did you do?" My voice cracked. "I'm giving you what you asked for." He released my hand, but the cold remained. "You wanted to understand why your father failed you. So we're going to watch him fail." "I don't." "Yes, you do." His eyes flared brighter, and I could see something in them now. Not anger. Something worse. Disappointment. "You think you're the first daughter to stand in a parking lot and wish her father dead? You think you're special because you're hurting." The words hit like a slap. "I didn't mean." "You meant every word." He stepped closer, and I could feel the ancient weight of him. Centuries of watching people destroy each other with love. "And now you'll see what those words cost. You'll watch the truth you were too ashamed to look for. And when it's over, you'll go home." "Why are you doing this?" For the first time, something flickered across his face. Not kindness. Something sadder. Because some people don't deserve to die thinking they weren't enough. Before I could ask what he meant, the void shifted. Colors bled back into existence. Shapes formed. Walls. Windows. The sharp smell of antiseptic and floor wax. We were in a building. A hallway. Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like dying insects. And there, standing at a window overlooking a parking lot, was a young woman I'd only seen in photographs. My mother. But not my mother as I knew her. Not the tired woman in the faded pictures my father kept on the mantel. This woman was alive. 23, maybe. Dark hair pulled back, wearing a simple dress that looked expensive in the way that quiet money does. She was holding a letter, and even from across the hallway, I could see her hands shaking. "Johns Hopkins," Lexington said quietly. "Medical school. Full scholarship." She'd been dreaming about it since she was 16. I watched her read the letter again. Watched her smile, this bright, unguarded thing that I'd never seen on her face in any picture. She looked so young. So full of something I couldn't name. "She's going to accept it," I whispered. "She has to. Watch." A door opened down the hall, and another version of someone I knew stepped out. My father. But not the man I'd left in the kitchen. This was Lionel at 22, tall and uncertain, wearing a shirt he'd probably ironed himself, holding flowers that looked like he'd picked them from someone's garden. He saw my mother and his whole face changed, like she was the only real thing in the world. "Lillian." His voice was so soft I almost didn't hear it. She turned, and the smile shifted. Became something more complicated. Lionel, what are you doing here? I wanted to. He stopped, saw the letter in her hands. His expression fell. You got in. I got in. She folded the letter carefully, like it might break. Full ride. They want me to start in August. That's... He swallowed hard, and I could see him trying to be happy for her, trying to hide the devastation underneath. That's incredible. You're going to save lives, Lil. You're going to be everything you dreamed. She didn't answer right away, just looked at him standing there with his borrowed shirt and his garden flowers and his love written so clearly on his face it hurt to witness. Then she said, I'm pregnant. The flowers fell, not dramatically, just fell, like his hands forgot they were holding them. He couldn't finish. 8 weeks. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the fear underneath. I found out last Tuesday. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you. He moved toward her, and there was no hesitation. No calculation. Just immediate, absolute certainty. Then we'll get married. I'll find work. Real work. My dad's farm is struggling, but I can sell some land or... Lionel, no. She pressed the letter against her chest like armor. This is Johns Hopkins. This is everything I've worked for. I know. He took her hands, gentle as breathing. And you should go. You have to go. We'll figure it out. I'll follow you. You can't follow me. Her eyes were bright with tears now. Your father needs you. The farm needs you. And I can't ask you to give up your life, so I can have mine. You're not asking. I'm offering. And what about our baby? The word cracked in half. What kind of mother starts her career by leaving her child? What kind of woman chooses ambition over? A human one. He cupped her face, and God, the tenderness in it nearly broke me. You're allowed to want things, Lil. You're allowed to have a life. She pulled away from him, pacing now, the letter crumpling in her fist. There are women who do both. Women who have families and careers, and you're not those women. His voice was so quiet. You're you, and you give everything to what you love. That's why I love you. But if you go to Baltimore and try to be a mother from 800 miles away, it'll destroy you. I know it will. I wanted to scream at her. Wanted to tell her to get on the damn plane. To choose herself. To not let some farmer boy and an accident derail everything she'd earned. But Lexington's hand was on my shoulder, cold as a gravestone. Keep watching, he said. My mother stood there for a long time, staring out the window at a future she'd never have. Then, slowly, deliberately, she tore the letter in half. No, I whispered. I'm keeping the baby, she said. And I'm keeping you. And I'm going back to Kansas. She turned to face him, and her smile was heartbreaking in its certainty. Because some dreams matter more than the ones you had before you knew what love was. He pulled her into his arms, and she cried, these deep, shaking sobs that sounded like grief and relief tangled together. And I realized with horror that she wasn't crying because she was giving something up. She was crying because she was choosing something she wanted more. She was choosing me. The hallway began to fade, and I reached for it, tried to hold on to this moment, to tell her not to do it, that I wasn't worth it, but Lexington's grip was iron. No, he said. You don't get to change it. You only get to see. The void swallowed us again, and I was falling through cold and dark and a terrible, crushing weight of understanding. My mother gave up everything she'd worked for. Not because she had to. Because she wanted to. And I'd spent 25 years hating my father for the poverty she'd chosen. I was on my knees in the void, though I couldn't remember falling. The darkness pressed against me like water, like I was drowning in all the years I'd spent being wrong. Get up. Lexington's voice cut through the black. Not cruel, just factual. We're not finished. I can't. My throat was raw. I can't do this. You can. You will. His hand appeared in front of me, pale and cold as moonlight. Because your father carried this alone for 23 years. The least you can do is carry it for one night. I took his hand because I had no choice. Because some part of me knew I deserved whatever came next. The void shifted again, and I braced myself. But when the world reformed, it wasn't a hospital or an office. It was somewhere I knew. The farmhouse kitchen. Our kitchen. But different, cleaner, newer, the wallpaper not yet faded by decades of sun. A younger version of it. The table where my father would later mend his jacket was covered in papers and envelopes and the scattered debris of a life being torn apart. And there, sitting with his head in his hands, was my father at 21. He looked so much younger than I'd ever imagined him. His shoulders not yet permanently bent from work. His hands not yet ruined by soil and weather. He was wearing a button-down shirt that actually fit, and for a moment I could see the man he might have become if everything had gone differently. On the table in front of him was a letter. Even from across the room, I could see the letterhead. University of Michigan. Engineering Department. Full scholarship, Lexington said quietly, standing beside me like a ghost at a funeral. Structural engineering. He'd applied on a whim, never thought he'd get in. But he did. And they wanted him badly enough to cover everything: tuition, housing, books. Everything. My father picked up the letter with shaking hands. Read it again like he was trying to memorize every word before it disappeared. When did he get it? I whispered. 3 days after his father died. 3 days after he learned the farm was drowning in debt his father had hidden for years. The creditors started calling that morning. Lexington's expression was unreadable. Your mother was 6 months pregnant.
They weren't married yet.
Barely had enough money for groceries. The kitchen door opened, and a man I didn't recognize walked in, late 50s, wearing a suit that had seen better days. He looked at my father with something between pity and impatience. Mr. Reeve. The man set a briefcase on the table. I've reviewed your father's accounts. It's worse than we thought. My father didn't look up. How much worse? If you sell everything, the equipment, the livestock, most of the land, you might clear the debt with a little left over. Enough to start fresh somewhere else. The man paused. Or you could keep the farm and spend the next decade working yourself to death to pay it off. Those are my options? Those are your options.
My father was quiet for a long time.
Then he said, what if I had help? What if I could bring in extra income? From where? You're 21 years old with no degree and a baby on the way. Even if you found work, it wouldn't be enough. Not for years. The man softened slightly. Lionel, your father made choices that put you in an impossible situation.
You don't owe him this.
Sell the farm. Take that scholarship. Give yourself a chance at a real future. My mother grew up in this house, my father said quietly. My grandfather built it with his own hands.
If I sell it, that's gone.
Forever. And if you keep it, everything else is gone. The man gestured at the scholarship letter. Michigan. Engineering. The chance to be something other than what your father was. I watched my father's face, and I could see the war happening inside him. The future he wanted pulling against the past he couldn't let go of. And underneath it all, the knowledge that there was a woman 6 months pregnant who'd already given up her own dreams because of him. When does Michigan need an answer? He asked. End of the week. My father nodded slowly. The man left. And I stood there in the kitchen watching my father sit alone with the weight of a choice no one should have to make at 21. He picked up the scholarship letter. Read it one more time. Then he stood up, walked to the sink, and pulled out a lighter. No, I breathed. Dad, don't. But he couldn't hear me. I was a ghost in my own history. He held the flame to the corner of the letter, and I watched Michigan burn. Watched the engineering department turn to ash. Watched every possibility that letter represented curl and blacken and disappear down the drain. When it was gone, he gripped the edge of the sink so hard his knuckles went white. And then, so quietly I almost didn't hear it, he said, I'm sorry. Not to me. Not to anyone who could hear. Just to the man he might have been. The kitchen door opened again, and my mother walked in, 6 months pregnant, radiant and terrified, carrying groceries she probably couldn't afford. Lionel? She saw his face and immediately set the bags down. What happened? What's wrong? He turned to her, and the smile he gave her was so convincing I almost believed it myself. Nothing. Just tired. Long day. Did that man from the bank come by?
Yeah.
We talked. It's fine. I'm handling it. She moved closer, studying him with those sharp eyes that had probably diagnosed 100 lies in medical school. You're sure? I'm sure. He pulled her into his arms, one hand resting gently on her belly where I was growing, where I was already costing him everything. We're going to be fine, Lil. I promise. I'm going to take care of you. Both of you. She believed him. Why wouldn't she? He'd burned the evidence. But I saw the truth. Saw the ash still circling the drain. Saw the future he'd killed so quietly she never even knew it existed. He never told her. I whispered. No, Lexington said. He let her believe he chose the farm because he wanted it. Let her believe he was content. Because if she knew what he'd sacrificed, she'd have carried that guilt for the rest of her life. He looked at me with those ancient, knowing eyes. Some men love like that. They make themselves small so the people they love can breathe. The kitchen began to fade, but I couldn't move. Couldn't process what I'd just seen. My father hadn't failed.
He'd chosen.
He'd buried his own dreams in a kitchen sink at 21, and he'd smiled while he did it, because he loved us more than he loved himself. And I'd called him a failure. The void swallowed me again, and this time I didn't fight it. I just fell, knowing there was worse to come. Knowing I deserved to see it all. I was sobbing in the darkness, and I couldn't stop. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't do anything but see my father's face as he burned that letter, that careful, gentle smile he'd given my mother while his own future turned to ash. Please, I gasped. Please no more. I understand. I understand now.
No.
Lexington's voice was closer than before, and when I looked up, his red eyes were the only light in the void. You understand what they gave up. You don't understand what it cost them. There's a difference. I can't. You told your father you wished he'd never existed. His words were surgical, precise, designed to cut. You think understanding is enough? You think recognizing sacrifice absolves you? He leaned down until we were eye level, and I could see centuries of grief reflected in those inhuman eyes. There are women in this part of Kansas who understand what you're about to see. Women who've lost everything to fire and fate and the cruelty of a world that doesn't care how much you love someone. They carry it quietly. They recognize each other in parking lots and grocery stores and hospital waiting rooms. And if you survive this, if you make it through what comes next, you'll be one of them. Before I could ask what he meant, the world reformed around us. And I knew immediately from the smell of smoke, from the sound of wood crackling, from the terrible orange glow that shouldn't exist inside a home, that this was the night I'd been protected for my entire life. We were standing in the front yard of the farmhouse, the same house I'd grown up in. But it was alive in a way I'd never seen, windows lit from within, not with electricity, but with fire. Greedy, consuming fire that ate through walls and memories and everything my father had tried so hard to preserve. And there, standing in the yard in his undershirt and jeans, barefoot on the cold November grass, was my father at 23. His face was streaked with soot and terror, and in his arms, wrapped in a blanket, was a tiny screaming baby.
Me.
Lillian. His voice was raw, broken, barely human. Lillian. He tried to move toward the house, but a neighbor, a man I didn't recognize, grabbed him, held him back. Lionel, you can't. The whole kitchen is gone. The ceiling's coming down. My wife is in there. He fought like an animal. The baby clutched to his chest with one arm while he clawed at the neighbor with the other. Let me go. She went back for Lana. She got her out, but she went back. For what? I don't know. The words came out like a scream. Like something tearing. She said she forgot something. She said she'd be right back. And then I saw her. A shadow moving behind the flames in what used to be the kitchen window. My mother, her nightgown already smoking, coughing so hard she could barely stand. She was holding something, I couldn't see what, and she was trying to get to the window, trying to reach the opening where fresh air still existed. Lil. My father's voice cracked. The window right there. She saw him holding me, and something in her face changed, this terrible, beautiful relief. She got me out. Whatever else happened, she'd gotten me out. She stumbled to the window, and my father was there immediately, reaching up, trying to help her through. Their hands met just for a second, just long enough for her to press something into his palm. A photograph, burned at the edges, but intact. A picture of the three of us from 2 weeks earlier, my father holding me, my mother leaning against his shoulder, all of us smiling like we had forever. I love you, she said.
And it wasn't goodbye.
It was fact. Pure and simple and true. Lillian climbed through. He was sobbing now, still holding me with one arm, reaching for her with the other. Please, baby, please.
She tried. God, she tried.
But the smoke was too thick, her lungs too damaged, her body already shutting down from the heat. She collapsed at the window, and the last thing I saw before the ceiling came down was her hand, still reaching for my father, for me, for the life she'd chosen over Johns Hopkins. The sound the house made, when it fell, was the sound of the world ending. My father didn't scream. He just stopped, like something inside him had been severed. The neighbor tried to pull him away, but he stood there, holding me against his chest, staring at the place where his wife had been, and I watched him age 10 years in 10 seconds. She went back for a picture, I whispered. The words felt like glass in my throat. She died for a picture. No, Lexington said quietly. She died making sure your father had proof that they'd been happy, that they'd been worth it. He gestured at the scene in front of us, the fire, the devastation, my father standing in the wreckage with a baby and a photograph and nothing else. She knew what that moment would do to him. Knew he'd spend the rest of his life wondering if he should have sold the farm, moved to the city, given her a different life. She went back for proof that this life, this choice, this love, had been enough. I was watching my father, and I could see him making a decision in real time. See him swallowing the grief, the rage, the guilt. See him looking down at me, at this tiny, screaming thing that had cost him his wife, and choosing to love me anyway. The neighbor finally pulled him back as the fire trucks arrived, their sirens cutting through the November night. But my father never looked away from the house, never let go of me, never let go of that photograph. And I knew, with devastating certainty, that he'd never told me the story because he didn't want me to spend my life thinking I owed him anything. He didn't want me to know that my mother died because of me, that he stayed in Kansas because of me, that every single day of his life had been shaped by a love that required him to become smaller so I could grow. The yard began to fade, and I wanted to reach for him, to tell that young, devastated father that his daughter would grow up hating him for not being enough, that she'd stand in his kitchen 23 years later and tell him she wished he'd never existed. But Lexington's hand was on my shoulder, and his grip was iron. "One more," he said, "and then you go home." "I can't," I sobbed.
Please.
"I understand."
I'm sorry.
"I'm so sorry doesn't raise the dead." His voice was cold, final. "You wanted the truth. This is what truth costs." The void pulled me under one last time, and I fell knowing there was nothing left inside me to break. But I was wrong. When the darkness released me, I was standing in the present. The real present. The now I'd been running from. But something was wrong. We were in the farmhouse, my farmhouse, but it was empty. The kitchen where I'd screamed at my father just hours ago was dark and silent. The jacket he'd been mending was folded neatly on the table, the needle still threaded through the fabric like he'd meant to come back to it. Like he'd been interrupted. "Where is he?" My voice came out strangled. "Lexington, where's my father?" But when I turned, the vampire was gone. I was alone in the kitchen with the jacket and the silence and the terrible weight of everything I'd just witnessed. I grabbed my phone. 7 missed calls. 3 voicemails. All from a number I didn't recognize. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely press play. The first message was from a neighbor, Mrs. Chun, who lived 2 miles down the road. Her voice was tight with worry. Lana, it's Vera Chin. Your father came by about an hour ago looking for you. He seemed real upset, honey. Real worried. Said you'd had a fight, and he needed to find you. I told him I hadn't seen you, but, well, call me when you get this. The second message was from the same number, 20 minutes later. Lana, it's Vera again. The police just called. There's been an accident on Route 4. They're asking about your father. I'm heading to the hospital now. Lawrence Regional. Please call me. The third message wasn't Vera. It was a woman's voice I didn't know. Professional, careful, trained to deliver bad news. Ms. Reeve, this is Lawrence Regional Hospital. Your father was brought in approximately 30 minutes ago following a traffic incident. He's in critical condition. We need you to come in as soon as possible. It's urgent. The phone slipped from my hands and shattered on the floor. Route 4. The same road I'd been on. The same stretch where I'd sat in that diner parking lot telling a stranger with red eyes that I hated my father. While I'd been watching the past, he'd been out in the rain searching for me. While I'd been learning what love cost, he'd been paying the final price. I ran. The drive to the hospital was a blur of headlights and rain and the sound of my own breathing. I kept seeing him in that kitchen, reaching for my hand. Kept hearing the words I'd thrown at him like stones. I wish you were never in my life. I hate you so much. The hospital was too bright, too clean, too full of people who weren't dying. I found the ICU because I followed the sound of machines, that steady, mechanical beeping that means someone's heart is still fighting even when the rest of them has given up. A nurse tried to stop me. Tried to explain about critical condition and life support, and you should prepare yourself. But I pushed past her because I'd spent 3 hours watching my parents sacrifice everything for me, and I wasn't going to let him die alone. He was in the third room on the left. And I wasn't prepared. Not even close. There were tubes everywhere, in his throat, his arms, his chest. Machines breathing for him, keeping him alive through sheer mechanical will. His face was gray, his lips bloodless, and there was blood. So much blood. Staining the sheets, the pillow, the white hospital gown that made him look smaller than I'd ever seen him. But his eyes were open. And when he saw me, something in his face shifted. Not relief. Something deeper. Like he'd been holding on just for this. Just to see me one more time. Dad. I collapsed into the chair beside his bed, and my hands found his, those worn, calloused hands that had held me through every nightmare, mended my clothes, burned his own future in a kitchen sink. Dad, I'm so sorry.
I'm so sorry.
I didn't mean it. I didn't mean any of it. He couldn't speak. The tube in his throat made sure of that. But his fingers tightened around mine. Just barely. Just enough. A doctor appeared in the doorway. Young, exhausted, carrying the kind of expression that people only wear when they're about to destroy someone's world. Ms. Reeve, I'm Dr. Patel. I need to be honest with you. Your father was struck by a vehicle traveling approximately 50 miles per hour. The driver didn't stop. By the time someone found him and called for help, he paused, and I could see him choosing his words carefully. The internal injuries are extensive. We've done everything we can, but his body is shutting down.
I'm sorry.
It's only a matter of time. How much time? Minutes. Maybe an hour. I'm sorry. He left us alone. And I sat there, holding my father's hand, and tried to find words big enough to carry everything I needed to say. But there weren't any. There's no language for this kind of regret. No way to fit a lifetime of love and anger and misunderstanding into the minutes before someone stops breathing. So I just held his hand and cried. His eyes never left my face. And even now, even dying, there was no anger in them. No resentment. Just love. Pure and complete and heartbreaking. The machines started to change their rhythm. Slower. Weaker. The countdown beginning. Please, I whispered. Please don't leave me. I just found out who you really are. I need more time. I need to tell you. But he was shaking his head, just slightly. And I understood. There was nothing I needed to tell him. He already knew. He'd always known. A nurse came in and removed the tube from his throat, her movements gentle and practiced. This was the end, then. They were letting him speak if he could, letting him choose how to spend his last breath. He looked at me, and his lips moved. The words came out rough and broken, barely more than a whisper. My beautiful Anna. I leaned closer, my tears falling on his chest, mixing with the blood on his gown. I will always love you. Each word cost him something. Each word was a gift he didn't have to give. And I do forgive you. Then his hand went slack in mine, and the machine screamed. And my father, Lionel Reeve, who gave up Michigan for me, who stayed in Kansas for me, who spent 23 years making sure I never knew what my life had cost him, was gone. I didn't scream, didn't collapse. I just sat there, holding his hand while it grew cold, and understood with perfect, unbearable clarity that some wounds don't heal, that some apologies arrive too late, that some people love you so much they'll spend their last breath making sure you know you're forgiven, even when you don't deserve it, even when you never deserved any of it. They asked me to leave so they could prepare the body. That's what they called him now. The body. Like he was already something else. Something that didn't need a name or a history or the 23 years he'd spent loving someone who'd spent the last 5 hours learning she never deserved it. I walked out of that room, and the hospital hallway stretched in front of me like a tunnel with no end. Fluorescent lights buzzing. The smell of antiseptic trying to cover up death. A woman at the nurse's station looking at me with professional sympathy that meant nothing because she didn't know him. Didn't know what he'd burned. What he'd buried. What he'd forgiven. I made it to the parking lot before my legs gave out. I sat on the curb in the space between 2 cars, and I couldn't cry anymore. Couldn't feel anything except the weight, this crushing, suffocating weight of understanding that arrived too late to matter. The rain had stopped, and the sky was starting to lighten at the edges. Dawn coming whether I wanted it or not. That's when I saw him. Lexington Dawson, standing at the far edge of the parking lot where the asphalt meets the dark, exactly like he'd been standing outside that diner. He wasn't smiling. Wasn't gloating. He looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with the approaching sunrise. I should have been angry. Should have screamed at him for showing me the truth when it was already too late to use it. But I wasn't angry. I was empty. He walked over slowly, his footsteps silent on the wet pavement, and stopped a few feet away. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "You're wondering why I showed you. I know why." My voice sounded like someone else's. "You wanted me to understand what I destroyed."
No.
He crouched down so we were eye level, and his red eyes caught the dawn light. "I wanted you to understand what you were given. The difference matters." "Does it?" I looked at my hands, the same hands that had ripped away from my father's just hours ago. He's still dead. I still said those words. Understanding doesn't change anything. Understanding changes everything. He was quiet for a moment then. "Do you know how many people I've watched die over the centuries? Thousands. Tens of thousands. Most of them die thinking they weren't enough. Thinking the people they loved didn't see them. Didn't understand." He gestured back toward the hospital. "Your father didn't die thinking that. He died knowing you finally saw him. That's not nothing." He forgave me. The words came out broken. Why would he forgive me? Because that's what love does when it's real. Lexington stood up, and something in his expression shifted, became something ancient and sad and knowing. It forgives the unforgivable. It gives when there's nothing left to give. It sacrifices everything and calls it a choice. He looked at the hospital, then back at me. "Your mother gave up Johns Hopkins. Your father burned Michigan. They both chose poverty and struggle and a life that was smaller than what they could have had. And they never regretted it. Not once. Because they had you. But You were young and angry and hurt, and you said something cruel. Yes." He said it like he was reading from a ledger. "But they were human and flawed, and made choices that trapped you in a life you didn't ask for. Also, yes, love isn't simple. It's not clean. It's messy and complicated, and sometimes the people who love you most are the ones you hurt the deepest because you know they'll forgive you." He tilted his head, studying me. "The question is, what do you do with that now?" I didn't have an answer. Didn't know if there was one. There are women like you, he said after a moment. Women who've been shown the truth by something that shouldn't exist. Women who carry the weight of love that arrived too late.
We don't talk about it.
But we recognize each other. He looked around the parking lot, the empty cars, the gray Kansas dawn, in hospital waiting rooms, in parking lots, in farmhouses at sunrise. You'll see them, and they'll see you, and you'll know. Know what? That you survived something that changes you forever. That you're not the same person who walked into that diner parking lot yesterday. That some truths carve themselves so deep they become part of your bones. He started to walk away, then paused. Your father left you something. In the kitchen. The jacket he was mending. Check the pocket. Why are you telling me this? Because some men spend their whole lives loving quietly, making sure the people they love never know what it cost them. But they leave evidence anyway. Little pieces of proof that they were there. That they saw you. That everything they gave up was worth it. His eyes glowed brighter for just a moment. Find the evidence, Lana. It matters. Then he was gone. Not walking away. Just gone. Like he'd never been there at all. I sat on that curb as the sun came up, and I thought about everything I'd seen. My mother in that hospital hallway, choosing me over her dreams. My father in that kitchen, burning his future because love required it. The fire that took my mother and the photograph she died protecting. And finally, my father in that hospital bed, using his last breath to forgive me.
Some of you know what this feels like.
To carry the weight of love that came too late. To wonder if you'll ever stop hearing the echo of words you wish you'd never said. If this story found you, if it opened something raw and real, know that there are others.
Stories like this.
Women like you. Moments that matter. Buried in a world that moves too fast to notice them. But they're here. And they're easy to lose if you let them slip away.
Stay.
Not because I'm asking, but because you don't want to forget what it feels like to be seen. There are women who come here when they need to feel less alone. This is where they find each other. I drove back to the farmhouse as the Kansas sky turned from bruised purple to pale gold. The kitchen was exactly as I'd left it. The jacket on the table, the needles still threaded through the worn denim sleeve. I picked it up with shaking hands and checked the pocket. Inside was a folded piece of paper.
Old.
Yellowed at the edges. I opened it carefully and my breath caught. It was the photograph. The one my mother had died for. My father holding infant me, my mother leaning against his shoulder, all three of us smiling like we had forever. The edges were burned, the paper fragile with age, but the image was clear. And on the back, in my father's careful handwriting, were words I'd never seen. Lana, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry I couldn't give you more. I'm sorry you grew up thinking you deserved better than what I could provide. But I need you to know, you were never the reason we had less. You were the reason we had everything. Your mother and I chose this life because we chose you. And we would make the same choice 1,000 times over. You were always enough. Always. I love you more than any words I know how to say. Dad. I stood in that kitchen where I'd screamed at him just yesterday and I cried. Not the broken, desperate crying from a hospital. Something different. Something that felt like grief and gratitude and guilt and love all tangled together until I couldn't tell them apart. He'd known. Somehow, he'd known I needed to hear it. And he'd left me proof that everything, Johns Hopkins, Michigan, the fire, the poverty, the worn jacket, the years of quiet sacrifice, had been worth it. I wasn't redeemed. I wasn't forgiven in any way that mattered. But I was changed. And I would carry this for the rest of my life. The weight of love. The cost of truth. The unbearable kindness of a man who used his dying breath to make sure his daughter knew she was loved. That's what I learned in a diner parking lot in Kansas. From a stranger with red eyes who understood that some lessons only come when it's too late to use them. But maybe that's the point. Maybe we're not supposed to get the truth when we can still fix things. Maybe we're supposed to get it when all we can do is carry it. When all that's left is the weight and the memory and the knowing. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough.